What's going on, everyone? Thanks for joining me tonight. I'm Keo Dyken, I'll be your host. So earlier today, I made a post in my concerns about the Raspberry Pi 5, and this is something that I have been discussing for the past few weeks, actually. And I was concerned about the Raspberry Pi 5 or the Pi Foundation losing their market share. In fact, let me go ahead and pull up a screen here so you guys can see exactly what it is I'm talking about. And so, right now the costs have been going up. And I know that the Raspberry Pi Foundation, or Pi Foundation rather, they get a bulk of their sales from the gaming community, like the home arcade monitors, stuff like that. There's a lot of guys who buy that kind of stuff for modding. And so the purpose of this video is to more or less speak on this from a gaming perspective. I'm not speaking on this from some of the other hobby genres that are out there, but definitely I know this more or less pertains to hobbyists using this for gaming, retro gaming, things of that nature. And so, as you guys know, the Raspberry Pi 5 was announced September 28th or September 27th. The price is now what is it, $60 for the 4 GB model, and it's $80 for the 8 GB model. And that's kind of confusing too, because the Pi 4 8 GB model is $75, or $75 cheaper than the Pi 5 8 GB model, and it's a little bit more than the other models. The entry level price for that is Raspberry Pi 4 is $55. And so I made a post earlier on my Facebook earlier today and just kind of totaled up the sum. And so let's take a little bit of this, or take a look at it. We'll look at CanaKit for an example here. You have your Raspberry Pi 5. Now, keep in mind the Raspberry Pi 5, $80 or $60. We're going to take the 8 GB model, which is the $80 price margin. That only covers the board. And if you guys have been watching some of the other single board computers and mini PCs out there, those are ranging right now anywhere between $100 to about $149. And so, as you guys know, Raspberry Pi, they weren't in the stores for a while. It was very hard to even get a Pi 4. Now they have some Pi 5s. They're back ordered, and it's going to do its thing. Don't get me wrong. There's still going to be a big need for Raspberry Pis in general, but I feel they've priced themselves out of their own market. If you go back several years, Raspberry Pi 2s and the 3s were averaging $30 to $35, and now to get everything that's included, you're going to pay roughly $127 to get the same thing. So the Raspberry Pi 5 is $80. The case is $10. That's this little red thing here, the red and white thing. That's $10. The power supply, which you really need if you want to overclock, and just make sure you have your ample power supply as directed, the 27 watt. That's another $10 to $12 just for that. Then if you get the micro cooler, which is the active cooler, that's another $5 on top of that. And then there was a review that came out. I know Jeff Geerling did a review. I'm not sure if he mentioned the price. I think it was still kind of in beta or whatnot. So I read this article, and they want $22 for the hat. Now, this hat barely fits on top of the Raspberry Pi 5 with the CanaKit cooler. I think you can move this thing out of the way and it works or fits directly on top. But if you price this up, $80 plus 5 plus another 10 plus another 10 plus 22, you're looking at $27 to get everything that you can get here, as to what something like the Youyeetoo single board computer can give you for 8 gigabytes, 64 gigabytes emmc storage. It roughly costs you about $134 for pretty much something else that's an x86 processor, but it comes with everything included. And the mini PCs that we're looking at roughly run anywhere. This is the cheapest one I can find right now, but I have seen these for about $129. And so Amazon has these. What's going on, business representative? Amazon has these for $138, which pretty much gives you the same exact thing. Now, all these additional features that you're getting with the Raspberry Pi 5, you have to price all this stuff separately. And you have new single board computers. I know ETA Prime's done some videos where one cost $100. I think the price on the Youyeetoo just went up a little bit by 10. but they priced themselves now into um, another price bracket with mini PCs. And one of the biggest things that the Raspberry Pi 5 or Raspberry community has always had has been the community. However, that doesn't hold any water when you start talking about Intel Celeron processors that are x86 and can run everything right out of the box without any form of development. Usually when we get a Raspberry Pi, it's like, what can we emulate? What can we run? What can we do with this? Let's tinker, tinker, tinker. But you don't have to do any of this kind of stuff with this board. Right out of the box, just to let you guys know, something like this, and even the B-Link, I've ran Technoparrot emulation with this. No problems, no questions asked, no hiccups, no issues. And as you can see, this goes up to 2.9 gigahertz for a mini computer. And we're going to get these Raspberry Pi 5s, which are running the Broadcom chips, and even Raspberry Pi 4s, for example. They run the Broadcom chips. And emulation is not even there. In fact, I don't even know if you guys have watched Lee PSP's video today where it was supposed to be a PlayStation 2 emulation video and none of the stuff booted or even worked. And so that's pretty much where we are. I know a lot of you guys are looking at, well, development's not there yet. It's not there yet. And I can tell you from a firsthand account where it should be and where it won't be. And considering that these boards have gone up another $50 in cost, anywhere between $35 to $55, what we were used to with the Pi 3 and the Pi 4, to $80 now to approximately $127, I feel that the Pi Foundation is slowly starting to price themselves out of the market. And I have spoken to a lot of the other arcade modders that are out there in the community, and unfortunately, they aren't coming back. They're sticking with mini PCs. I don't blame them. I'm not a Raspberry Pi, fanboy. I do believe in doing what makes business sense. And, a lot of people don't have time to tinker for pretty much the same price. And it's a great deal. I mean, you get a great mini PC, 128, 129. It's a B-Link. You get some USB 3.0 ports. You could put your SATAs in there. Base frequency model, this runs exactly like the Youyeetoo. Starts out at 2.0 gigahertz base processor frequency. You don't have to overclock any of these. It adjusts incrementally depending upon what app you're using or program you're running at that time. Goes up to 2.9 gigahertz burst frequency. And those things are great. And if you guys, I'll post some videos on this because I got this to the Youyeetoo and I was surprised I could run Technoparrot on it. 10 watt power consumption. 4M Intel Smart Cache, 4 megabytes, 450 megahertz graphics base frequency. It's pretty much what some of these other single board computers that are Intel based typically run, and 24 graphics execution units. So a few years ago, this wasn't the problem. A few years ago, if you wanted something that was an Intel Celeron based processor being able to run a lot of this stuff, you were looking at anywhere minimum $250 to $300. And so it just wasn't even questionable as if this was an option or not. And so as of now, the Raspberry Pi 5 are competing with mini PCs. They're competing with mini PCs where you have to buy everything separately. You need a case, you need a fan and all the other stuff. So minimally, you're looking at 105 for that kind of stuff. And like the Orange Pi 5, the Youyeetoo, for example, all of these have M.2 slots. This little thing is a beast. This Youyeetoo single board computer pretty much has everything on it. And come to find out, even has that over-the-air attachment thing that'll work directly with cell phones. If you guys are used to that kind of payment processor thing. But look, this thing has everything on it. It's the same freaking price. You have your M.2 slot here where you don't need a $22 hat. It has your Wi-Fi 4G LTE M.2 key if you want to go ahead and add that. Even has a built-in microphone if you ever want to use that. And keep in mind, the Raspberry Pi 5, they removed the audio video jack off of that. So they raised the cost and then they removed some things. And then if you want to add some additional things to kind of be on par with, let's say, the Orange Pi 5 or some of the other single board computers that are out there, you have to pay an additional $22. And this, keep in mind, you're not paying you're not paying for eMMC storage. So that's something else that's lacking for this. So just wanted to make this video kind of speak to you guys for just a few moments. Share it, and then on something like this, you can knock an additional $10 off. You see, this comes with everything that you need here. You can increase the RAM up to 16 gigabytes. Let's see what that one costs. This one goes up a little bit in price for $219. The price range, so let's say if you do the mediocre price, 8 gigabytes, 128 gigabyte storage with eMMC. You're not going to get that with the Raspberry Pi 5. However, you're still within the price range. And then it comes with, this is that little adapter I was telling you guys about. It comes with the power supply and the fan and the heatsink that is on here, as well as the other mini PCs too. It comes with all of that included for that price. Let's go ahead and scroll all the way down to the bottom. Those are all the things you can do with this. You can hook up 3 screens to it. Comes with everything right out of the box. You don't have to buy it separately. There we go. There it is right there. So that's everything that comes in the box. You don't need to buy everything separately. I do think the Raspberry Pis will look a little bit more attractive if it came with everything that you needed out of the box. If it came with the fan, the active cooler, actually, a case, or at least the active cooler and the power supply for $80. Honestly, I don't think that would be as bad. So we do have that. Additionally, let's take a look at the B-Link over here. This is the B-Link 138, pretty much comes with the same thing. Either one of those single board computers that can now run Intel Celeron based processors, you have an operating system that is already included, or you can add Linux, you can add Windows, or Ubuntu with any one of these. And so I hope the Raspberry Pi Foundation gets back to some of the, I mean, I know things cost money. Don't get me wrong. We're not trying to tell them how to run their business for the most part. But at the same time, this was an affordable single board computer back in the day, where it was a cheaper solution primarily for people in my community that does retro gaming. You know, you pay your Atari all the way up to Sega Saturn and also Dreamcast for the most part for the low cost of $55. And now you're looking at $80 to about $127. And you know, the other thing that's going to hurt is in the retro gaming community. If you can't run additional systems for the extra added cost, people are going to start to look at these other alternatives, knowing that for something like this, you can run Technoparrot on here, or you can run, you know, your CoinOps, Hyperspin, Big Box. You have your x86 processor. I mean, you have, if you want to run Adobe programs on here, everything that you have for your personal computer, you can run on this because it's the same environment. It's the same form factor in terms of what you're reading. All the drivers are the same. DirectX, your Steam games, you know, you can run everything within its power consumption limit, you know, liability based upon its processing speed and RAM. And we always still have these hiccups. As you can see with the Raspberry Pi 5, we still have emulators and games like Killer Instinct, NFL Blitz, running either too slow, too fast, the sound is off, there's glitchy, games are crashing. And for the extra added cost for retro gamers in this particular market, people are going to start to look elsewhere, considering that they're now priced with single board computers, and some of these results aren't there. And some of you are probably saying, well, Keo, you know, the development optimization is still not there. It's still brand new. I know where it's going to be. We've developed on the Orange Pi 5, and the Orange Pi 5 is a stronger processor based upon, I'm not going to say so much stronger processor, but it has 8 cores, and based upon what I've seen running from 2 of the same scenarios, running, let's say, Tatsunoko versus Capcom and some of the other games with Nintendo Wii from a desktop environment, the Orange Pi 5 still performed much better having access to Vulkan drivers. Even on the Raspberry Pi 5, there were still glitches. And so want to show you guys a quick clip. This was something I intended to play in a separate video. This is a brief comparison between my experience on the Orange Pi 5 with GameCube, which is what you guys have currently been seeing on the Raspberry Pi 5 with gaming emulation from an actual gaming front end, compared to what Tatsunoko versus Capcom looks like desktop on the Raspberry Pi 5. and the Orange Pi5. And some of these clips are from ETA Prime. There's some other video clips out there, but I do have some additional clips I will show you guys at some later dates. But let's take a look at this right quick so you guys can get a better idea about where I'm going with this. All right, so now we have 3 different videos of emulation. The first one here is from the Orange Pi5. But again, this is running Vulkan. Just notice that. So Vulkan is activated through desktop. This was ETA Prime's video that he did back in May, which was actually several months ago or so. And then over here, we have the Raspberry Pi 5, brand new video from ETA Prime. This is showcasing the Dolphin emulator. Between this one's on the Raspberry Pi 5. Again, based upon the results, the Orange Pi 5 has a better GPU and is showing much better in terms of performance. This one has an additional hit to it, which you guys will take a look at. And then over here on the right, we have the RetroPie image that is available to us on the. And before we go any further in this video, I just want to, I was just reminded that I believe the GPU on the Raspberry Pi 5 on the clip from ETA Prime's video is overclocked to 1000. So the GPU on the Orange Pi 5 is stock at about 800 megahertz. So that's also something else to keep in mind too. The Orange Pi 5, this is my own custom work that we put out through the Supreme team. Let's go ahead and have a look.
Another Wii game, Tatsunoko versus Capcom. And remember, I mean, we're not going to be able to upscale right now. And once I pulled that special move off, you can see that FPS really dipped down. It's definitely taken a toll on that GPU, but it's very promising to see these games running so well right now. There's a lot more that I want to test in the future, but I kind of wanted to get this video out. If there's any other game.
All right, so that one has some audio hiccups. So again, this is the best performance. So keep in mind the Orange Pi 5, based upon what we've seen so far, is giving us much better performance in terms of emulation from the desktop.
We've got some Wii emulation using the Dolphin emulator. And there are a lot of GameCube and Wii games that are going to run really well on this board.
All right, no hiccups, no stuttering as it was on the Raspberry Pi 5. And again, just to reiterate, this is an actual gaming front-end RetroPie using OpenGL, I believe it's 1.2 or whatever the case might be, because the environment does not support Vulkan right now. Now, in terms of the single board computer with the Orange Pi using the Rock chip 3588, you cannot overclock this. Actually, you probably can. I'm not going to touch it, but it specifically says no overclocking. As far as I know, none of these are overclocked. The performance is different, but again, the main issue is 2 different performance environments, desktop and desktop, actual gaming front end. All right, so I just wanted to point that out for you guys as a point of reference. Again, I'll go into more depth about that in some upcoming videos. But as you can see, one of the points of it is hey, if I'm paying $80 or $127 for a Raspberry Pi 5 and I'm using it for gaming, you know, would the potential for a full emulation be there? And that is exactly what you're going to get. We're trying to get, let's say, the Orange Pi 5 or Raspberry Pi 5 gaming environment where they're using Batocera, Recalbox, RetroPie directly to what the desktop environment will take a look at. Unfortunately, until that actually happens, that's not going to happen. I discovered several bottlenecks that none of us can really fix that has something to do with the gaming environment or the KMS DR11 driver speaking directly to desktop to access Vulkan. And then, of course, there's some other issues there in terms of hiccups in emulation. But for the most part, as of right now, if you're considering this as a consumer, these are things, you know, it may not hit home right now, but it will in a few days, in a few weeks. You know, I know in the RetroPie community, or actually Raspberry Pi community, we have this thing about more development, but we're still looking for development even in the Raspberry Pi 4 community to say, hey, well, maybe the emulators will get better. And they're not. The emulators are not getting any better in terms of performance. And the costs are going up for single board computers. And as I said before, the performance of the single board computers, you know, they're there in terms of actual hardware, but it's not going to be enough for most people to justify paying that $80 to $127. And you could get all of that right out of the box with a B-Link or a Youyeetoo single board computer. And of course, there's some other single board computers out there that are Intel Celeron x86 based that can run additional front ends and can run additional environments. And so I strongly believe now that the Raspberry Pi or Pi Foundation have priced themselves out of their own particular market. Again, they came in when I first started. The Raspberry Pi 2s and 3s were originally $25 to $30 when I first started. I was back in 2018, and then the Pi 4 came along. Okay, it could perform, it could do exactly what it needed to do, but the performance, we never got that. And we on the Supreme team, we try to get it to where it needed to be, adding in display marquees, adding in additional emulators. And we've had people run some forms of emulation like PlayStation 2 directly from desktop, but it just wasn't there. And we're kind of there right now with the performance enhancements on the Orange Pi 5 and the Raspberry Pi 5. But considering that they haven't been around for a while, I mean, they were kind of hard to get. The Raspberry Pi 5s or Raspberry Pis in general were hard to get to 2020, 2021, 2022. And now the single board the cost of mini PCs have dropped down in price. That's going to be the danger zone for them. And I feel that they've really priced themselves out of the market. And for many of you who are home arcade monitors, I've talked to you, we've spoken, and many of you are not coming back because you said, Keo, what's the point of buying a Raspberry Pi single board computer? You got to do all that development, and the emulation still isn't there. You could run Sega full screen or full speed, Dolphin full speed. And I wasn't sure several weeks ago what were the minimal requirements for TechnoParrot, and now we can run TechnoParrot for $109. In fact, this is one of the cheapest prices around where you can get a PC or a single board computer that can fully run TechnoParrot. Because again, the TechnoParrot specs are kind of off, so I had to just turn it on and see what could happen. Most of you are getting the video cards and everything. You do need a video card for some of the other TechnoParrot games, but I was playing Alien Extermination and a couple of other games just with the integrated graphics running just fine. And so we'll try to get the Raspberry Pi units and the Orange Pi 5 units, to that point. But we're reaching that bottleneck as to, does the cost justify, the time we're spending into it, the money, the long wait times. Many of us have been like some of the first ones to order Raspberry Pi. We still haven't gotten any of those. They're still on back order, trying to get those. And, we're still seeing videos now where the performance still just isn't there. And I know how frustrating it could be when you buy something, you're like, well, dang, shouldn't this thing just perform or do what it needs to do? Like, shouldn't the extra hardware just grant it to do what it needs to do? And, it's not as simple. I mean, like I said, Killer Instinct 1 and 2, NFL Blitz, several of the other games like N64. And N64, by the way, on these mini PCs and the Youyeetoo, they run full speed. No questions, no overclocking needed. They run full speed, and it has nothing to do with the hardware requirement. It's a separate issue with emulation. And so with single board computers, they're kind of falling behind in terms of emulator, not competitiveness, but compatibility to single board computers versus as you get an x86 single board computer, it's pretty much there. So with the Raspberry Pi 5, if you're trying to get everything that you needed to for, let's say, this is the hat here. And this is the only price I've seen the cost of the hat. I haven't seen it directly on the Raspberry Pi Foundation website. Guy says, as I was about to complete this post, I noticed the Pine Berry offers the hat drive bottom that's not quite in hat since it's bigger and is meant to be connected to the bottom side of the Raspberry Pi 5, but have the advantage of supporting M.2 drives, SSDs. The rest is pretty similar to the hat drive, except there's through a extra 5-volt 4-pin connector acting as a redundant power supply. It can be ordered for €25.99. So you're looking at an additional $20 just for this to get what these other devices already have included for the same cost. So that's where we are right now. I think this is going to open some eyes for those of you out there in the community, for you looking for options. I know Christmas season is coming up, and we know right now even the Raspberry Pi 5s are on back order. Some people aren't going to get theirs until April or May of next year. That's just how back ordered some of these companies are. And you get all this right out of the box that are plentiful. There's plenty of these right now for $138. You get all this included, and you're already familiar with this. And usually, like if I was doing a single board computer to single board computer comparison review from one to the other, the biggest argument that would come up is, well, hey, the Raspberry Pi community is larger than anything else. It can't compare, but they definitely can't compare to the x86 Windows community, which is already available. And you could play your Steam games. You could play your Xbox, download your Xbox games on here, load Apple if you want to. And I get it. I know that there are certain applications that are garnered for the Raspberry Pi device. Totally get it. Not really speaking to it from that standpoint. But even then, some of those companies, some of those hobbyists and developers will consider this price range of $139, $138, $109, and then factor in this Raspberry Pi unit that costs $80, board only, starter kit, $154, $154, $138, $154, $138. And this is something you're already used to, or not this one. This is something you're already used to. And like I said, a lot of the arcade modders, they switched over. They're not coming back because they don't have time to kind of mess around. And, they're right, for the same price point. So I wanted to put this video out. And, if you guys wanted to comment, what your thoughts were. I know a lot of you agreed with the post that I posted earlier. But when you start to look at these price comparisons, in terms of what they're asking for now. I said a few weeks ago, if they raised it a few more pennies, then they're going to be in some hot water. So if you get the 4 GB Pi model, this is the Pi5 4 GB. The board by itself is $60. The starter kit with 128 GB drive or SD card is $134. And like the Youyeetoo over here, it also has an SD card slot. There it is right there. It has M.2. And of course, you could use USB 3.0 right out of the box. You don't have to add any special codes or anything. It works directly with your USB drives or SSDs. And I prefer the Samsung SSDs. So your starter kits, you're looking at $139.99. And this is all the stuff that typically your PC will come included with. So Raspberry Pi 5, 80 gigabytes, $5 for the fan, which is needed. You're going to need it. $9 or almost $12 or so for the power supply. Again, that's needed. $10 for the case. That's needed because this thing could touch a table, because I've had that happen, and then it messes up on you, and then you got to fill out a warranty or a pair or something. So all the things that are needed for just that standard price. Then $22 for the Pi hat, $127. So again, guys, just wanted to give you my thoughts on this. Let me know what your thoughts are in the at the end of this video in the comments section. But the only justification for this price going up, and again, speaking on this from a gaming perspective, is additional emulators and additional things that you can do with it. If it's not there, and I'm talking about fully, I'm not talking about playing games all the way through, 80% through, and then it crashes on you. I'm not talking about playing games at full speed, but yet they sound like chipmunks. A shout out to Damien Deal With It and that other guy, I can't think of his name, for posting some real gameplay or video reviews showing what it can and cannot do. That's something people need to appreciate. It's not really time consuming to go through that kind of stuff and really see what happens from a gaming front end. But yeah, this is what you're going to get. And people aren't playing for hiccups and sound stutterings. And I know that the Raspberry Pi was not intended to be a retro gaming thing, but that is a large consumer base, of theirs. But from a general sense, if you're just anybody looking for projects, you're paying the same price for a mini PC for the same thing that you would get with the Raspberry Pi 5 if you go with a full starter kit, adding on all the additional doodads. So that being said, guys, I'll be out. Let me know what your thoughts are. I'll catch you guys later. You guys have a good night. Peace. Bye-bye.